All right, I'm Robbie. I'm the head of business development for Terralytiq. We help companies decarbonize their supply chains. Our head of engineering, Ali, is going to take us through an overview of the supply chain problem in a little bit more detail, and then I'll give a demo of how our platform works.
Since around 2018, we saw a rise in target setting, reporting, and we've started to get a pretty good handle on Scope 1 and Scope 2, the emissions that you generate directly or your indirect emissions from your electricity consumption. But unfortunately, there is still this giant elephant in the room, and that's your upstream Scope 3 emissions. So if we look at the industrial supply chain, about 30% of global emissions right now are coming from industrial. And 80% of those emissions are embedded in the upstream Scope 3 processes. And companies are struggling. They've been going to their suppliers. They say, okay, do you have an emission factor for me? Are you reporting? Do you have lessons learned from what you've done in the past? Where are we going? And the problem is, these networks have not been set up to address this problem because there's one chief sustainability officer who goes out and says, what data do you have? Okay, do you know who your suppliers are? And that's not enough. And so our proposition is that you can lead with action, you can lead with collective incentives, and you can lead with a business case. Do next slide. Awesome. So why is this problem so tough? Okay, well, one, we touched on it a little bit. Sustainability directors are bogged down in an endless cycle of data collection. And data collection is a good metric, but it's not a goal. Collecting data and getting more accurate data is not a goal. Two, there's tens of thousands of supply chains. I think 20,000 was the number we just heard from General Motors. And so when you're looking at these highly emissive sectors in the automotive industry, in the embodied buildings, and even in renewables, a company like NextEra, who's deploying massive amounts of solar panels and wind turbines across the country, has to reconcile the fact that there are embodied emissions in all of the sustainable infrastructure that eventually we're going to have to be accountable for. But it's tough because it's so distributed around the world. Three, it doesn't seem like there's a business case, or at least not an obvious one, but that's not true. It's a false perception. There's opportunity both to gain market share, there's opportunities to be leaders in an industry, and there's even opportunities to save money, doing things like increasing recycling metal or investing in battery recycling, starting to do vertical integration. And lastly, sustainability is siloed. Right now, that sustainability department doesn't necessarily have the power that they need to mobilize the entire organization to meet these goals. Now, how do we move from this problem to the solution? Well, first, it's a problem of prioritization. So you've got 20,000 facilities, you've got tons of different suppliers. So how do you collect this data? The back of the envelope math, the Google Sheet math, the Excel math is not enough. We need to deploy advanced analytics and software solutions, leverage the back of AI to understand what are the pressure points, who's most movable, and where's the money that you're leaving on the table. And so we bring tech. Two is you need to have product-level roadmaps. Spend-based data is not enough. You need to start from a bill of materials, and you need to start from product-level breakdowns to understand what mechanisms are at your disposal and how do you move the needle. Three, you can lead with a supplier business case. So it's possible to go into that supplier conversation with a costed-out understanding of what it's going to take to deploy something, instead of a preliminary ask, hey, do you have any data for me? Hey, are you working towards a goal? Are you reporting? We're not sure. And finally, sustainability cannot be acting on its own. This is an entire company problem. So when you talk about addressing Scope 3 upstream emissions, you need to be mobilizing your procurement, your financial, and your sustainability groups within the company. I'll turn it over to Robbie to show a little bit more concretely how we think about doing this.
And I think we're going to switch over to the video now. Perfect. To the audience, going to give a live demo of our platform with using a pre-recorded video. I'm going to try and keep up with myself 2 days ago when I recorded this, but excuse any slight glitches between my talk track and the demo. Let's do it. All right. So here we can see the platform. We could see the platform. There we go. Now we're HD. All right. Welcome to Terralytiq for real. We're going to go through a demo of an electric bike manufacturer, so not something that our friends at GM are producing yet, but you can see here that what we can do is upload a product's bill of materials and then take this to build a roadmap a business case for each supplier that you can then use for a collaborative discussion on how you can reduce emissions. We cover a range of materials from the complex, the battery cell, the lithium, the cobalt, the manganese that go into those supply chains, and something slightly similar like aluminum, not similar because it's emissive, it is, but a few less production steps along the way. We're gonna go through just the aluminum frame in a second here. Okay, that was pretty well timed. And now you can see the aluminum chain that goes from the bauxite mining, that's the raw ore that comes out of the ground, all the way through the digestion, the smelting, to that final ton of extruded aluminum that you can actually purchase. What we allow is for a customization based on the region, so that might change your production process, as well as the different type of technologies that were used. Aluminum has many different ways. There's the conventional smelter way. There's increased scrap rates. There's now increased penetration of renewable electricity that's possible at sites like the smelter, and you can electrify some of the upstream processes like digestion. So how does this turn into metrics? Well, we now go forward and see. Here's what that same chain looks like from looking at the emissions. You can see here that the aluminum smelter is the most emissive step in the entire journey, but there are emissions that come from other facilities. And it's important to know this when you hear about the thousands of facilities where you need to prioritize. The real foundation, though, of Terralytiq is our cost footprint, which you can see here, which takes that same breakdown and says, what is the should cost of each of the facilities, which crucially forms the foundation for how you can collaborate on a business case with your supplier. We allow for all sorts of customization as well. There's a lot of problems with average data in the industry. So you can see here if your supplier has a certain electricity price, you can update that, trickles back into our model so you have a real projection of what it will actually cost for your suppliers to decarbonize. So now let's pretend our fake manufacturer has a 40% reduction target in the next 5 years, pretty lofty. How are they gonna get there? Here's the set of things that they can do. From left to right on this curve, you can see what we call a marginal abatement cost curve, which sorts the best business cases to the worst or the hardest to get over. For aluminum, we have 31 different options in our pre-populated tool here that can be customized for your individual facility. Once again, the electrification and scrap recycling rates, those are actually in the money there on the left-hand side. And then there's some more CapEx-intensive levers that we heard from Bern earlier, like hydrogen and carbon capture, that aren't yet there. Finally, we can translate that into a collaborative business case that we can use to serve as the foundation for implementation. Here you can see that we chose a few different years. Some of the easier to do levers we put for 2025 because it's more likely to happen. And you can see what would it actually take for us to hit our Scope 3 targets. Did a little refresh and our fun little windmill pops up. And in a second, one more second, okay, there you go. You get an idea of, all right, will these sequence of initiatives get us to our targets? What will be the final change in our cost of our procurement volume? And what's that investment that we're gonna need to make with our suppliers? And that's something that the supplier probably has to make, but then there's the difference of public investment as well as different demand poolings and private financing that you can start to pursue. And we're enabling that entire collaboration process. Now we go to the thank you slide. Because thank you for seeing that demo and mostly on track. We're gonna be around for the rest of the conference, so if you know anybody else, GM, industrials, and manufacturers looking to decarbonize, we're here to help. Thank you.